Merrimack TV is committed to our community. From gavel-to-gavel coverage of town and school board meetings to updates on town services and projects, we aim to keep you connected.
Good morning, I'm Kyle Fox, Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack.
Hi, I'm Diane Trippett. I'm the town clerk tax collector for the town of Merrimack.
I'm Captain Matt Tarleton with the Merrimack, New Hampshire Police Department.
And keep the public informed of every motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
And many moments, so you can be confident that we're here for you. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Follow Merrimack TV on Facebook.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 25th special meeting of the Merrimack School Board. Please remember to take your microphones off mute and rise to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item number 2 is the public participation guidelines for remote learning. Because we are remote, we can't take live testimony. So if anyone wants to send any public comments, please send them in the following way. You may send an email to publiccomments@sau26.org. Again, that email address is publiccomments@sau26.org. We do require your name and address for the record on such documentation. Based on the amount of information emails we received this evening, our goal is to always read off verbatim the comments as we receive them. If the comments become too heavy in volume, we would just have to not read the public comment into testimony. It's an all or nothing proposition. Regardless, we will put all public comments in our minutes for tonight's meeting, but we would just not be able to read them tonight if we can't read all of them. Up until just recently, we'd never had that happen, and it has only happened once to date. We got a little closer last week, but fortunately we have been able to read them except for that one time. I just like to be sure to address this up front in case we find ourselves in that position. So the next item on the agenda is public participation. Shannon, do we have any public comments to be read?
There are 2, if you could please hold. Okay, I was literally going to get a voicemail, so I wanted to not have that entered into the record. So thank you. Sorry about that good old landline living. So I will go first, and this was one that did not provide an address last time, and we did get one in the interim. It's Amy Goodridge at 33 Ellie Drive. And I was very happy to hear K4 students will be going back full time. This is long overdue and so important for their development. Next is Lisa Weatherby, 1 Longa Road. And I want to write in about your decided time of quarantining for families of someone with COVID in the household. Recently, we had COVID in the family. My son, who's in school at Mashcall Elementary, has been seriously affected by the recommended quarantine time that you have decided on. This 14 days after the affected person's 10 days is absolutely ridiculous. My son tested negative. I can see if you would like to have him quarantined for additional 10 days. However, asking for 14 days is unrealistic. My son has been out of school since January 13th, the day I tested positive. Now he will be out until February 10th. That is 4 weeks of missed school. My son is on an IEP. He has a learning disability. Remote learning has been hard enough, and now we have to find a way to keep him up to date and on his plan while missing school an entire week based on your protocols. The fact that you will not allow families to take a simple test to see if they are negative and be allowed back into school is absurd. Also, the fact that you will not allow families to switch to remote learning during times like this is a huge unnecessary hardship. Why can't families decide to go back and forth between the remote learning or in school? Other school districts in our state allow this on an as-needed basis. This whole idea that has been proposed will likely make people never tell the school system the truth. People would rather not tell when they get COVID than go through 4 weeks of quarantine. I really think the school needs to reevaluate the length of time per quarantine. What you have decided on is over the CDC guidelines, we are failing our children. Sincerely, Lisa Weatherby. And finally, Dr. Dawn Braille, 69 Patton Road. I was wondering if JMUs can start the 4 days a week of instructional time before February 8th. Given there are no significant class changes like one would see at the high school with semester-based classes, I feel strongly it should be considered as an option. Thank you, Dr. Dawn Braille. And that is what I have so far this evening.
Thank you, Shannon. We'll move on to number 4, which is board consideration of proposed instruction and learning plan for grades 5 through 12. So last week we heard the proposal from administration, which was regarding grades 5 through 12, as well as grades K through 4. As part of that discussion, we agreed to push any decision-making on grades K through 5 through 12, until this week, which would essentially allow folks in our community to be able to provide input to us, as well as for administration would like to know sooner rather than later so that they can move forward with any of the plans that we may act upon. So I'm going to open it up for discussion, but before I do so, Dr. McLaughlin or John Fabrizio, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I don't think at the moment. We're happy to answer questions that the board has.
Okay.
We're open.
No, I would agree. I think the plan we presented last week along with the PowerPoint was pretty detailed, and if there's anything more we can answer, we're willing to.
Okay, and for those of you watching at home, that PowerPoint is out on our website that has the proposed plan. So if you'd like to pull that up to follow, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. I see Andy's hand up.
Okay, so we've all as a board received many questions from parents, and one of the ones I wanted to tee up first, because I want us to make sure we go through all of them. The first one I want to tee up is specifics on how the 2 cohort day, or the 2 days where the cohorts are not in school, but rather participating via the video will work. There's concern that I've heard from several parents that we're going to be sitting their kids down for 6 hours of Zoom calls on the days they're home. I was hoping that there would be a more logical use of the video during those days where they weren't in school, but that's one of the details I don't recall us really hearing as far as the approach would be on those days when the video would be used. So I know there's other questions about the videos, but the first one I want to put on the table is, how do you envision sort of a day in the life, if you will, of a student that's at home utilizing the videos as part of the classroom?
So John, I'm assuming that you're able to tackle that, but before you do, I just want to sort of preface by saying this. Andy, it is a good question. And let's remember that part of the reason that that we all began to question an alternative way of delivering our instruction, if we think of second semester as a potential for a reset, is because there was concern that the extension days for students who were hybrid weren't as effective as they might be. So that's been the argument for some time. We put that in place with every good intention after a lot of work in the summer. And like most districts are finding, some parts of their plans worked well, some didn't. Through no fault of anybody's, but the extension days didn't really seem to have the punch that we had hoped they'd have. So part of the plan that's before the board tonight is a reflection, of that reality. So we're trying to recognize what didn't work great and try to improve upon that. So this is another example of, you can't have everything. So if the answer to better instruction on the remote days is to have there be more instructional time, then by definition, that's gonna mean more, in this plan anyway, more time in front of the cameras. But so it's like you solve one problem, and in a way you sometimes create another. So I just want to remind people that this was an attempt to address, one problem that was brought to us that we recognized ourselves. But having said that, I think John's going to share with you that it does not stand to reason that 6 hours a day in front of a camera is entirely the proposal. So, John, if you want to just speak to that a little bit, I know you're prepared.
Sure, Mark. Thank you. You brought up a good point. I mean, it comes down to, well, we don't want more Zoom time, but we want more instruction. Well, you can't have both, and it's just that's the simple language on it. And I think that's it. So I did a little research that anyone could do, and looked it up for other models across the state. We haven't done it yet, so to say, what's the model in Merrimack going to look like? Again, it's come up with every answer you can before we actually do it. And you can't sometimes. So some of this we're going to have to do first. And then along the way, we'll work with our teachers, professional development, and continue like we have done, like we did with implementation of Canvas. We took not our time because it took very quickly. We've been up and running with our Canvas platform, but we did that through continual professional development as we utilize the tools that we had in front of us. This will be the same process. So I'm just going to share my screen because it's probably the easiest way I can do this. If you give me 1 second here, because I have to.
As John's doing that, I just want to just comment on one thing that John said. We recognize that the introduction of Canvas was delayed from the summer. So we understand that, and that was partly because the state wasn't as prepared to support district users as it might have been. So when John's referring to quickly, it's once we were able to get the support from the state that we needed, then we were able to transition, quite quickly for something that in other cases would take, a year or more. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that that we had hoped in the summer that we'd have Canvas more early in the year. So there was a delay there. I just want to be clear about as to why that was. Go ahead, John.
Yeah. And to add to that, really the DOE and iLearn New Hampshire didn't get up and rolling until November. And that was a part that's just a reality of trying to move an initiative that big, that quick. And that's what the reality was. So sample, Andy, is the best sample I can give you because there's a sample of concurrent learning schedule. And this is what it would look like at the high school level. It would be with, periods 1, 3, 5, and 7 on Monday. And this would be in school. And then out of school would be periods 1, 3, 5, 7 online for cohort B. And then we would, of course, combine the real students. And you can see throughout this, that's how the week would look. It switches on Wednesday when you have 1, 3, 5, 7 at home for cohort A, and then in school 1, 3, 5, 7 for cohort B. And vice versa. On Thursday, it's the even numbers. And then on Friday, individual supports, independent work, online learning again for our team. That's what a sample into the kind of guts of it, what it would look like for a schedule. Then kind of what are some options when we look at this? And again, this is research based from other districts around the country that have done this and worked through it. And again, it's a framework for how to manage that and how it would look. And this is in a 50-minute lesson versus a 90, but our teachers and their ability to, plan is very strong, and they can certainly be able to adapt something like this wise. So you'll see there is personalized or adaptive learning going on, then some targeted instruction and some independent and collaborative work. So it kind of, if I'm teaching the lesson, I might begin it with targeted instruction and say, okay, those in front of you, I need you to focus on me on the board. And then those at home in Zoom, I point my Vivio 360 camera at the board so they can see what I'm doing and instructing. For 10 to 15 minutes, I'm giving direct instruction. I turn and say, okay, now those at home, I need you to, take a little bit of time right now and do some independence. And I want you to complete, this following writing example, these following math problems. And then the class in front of me, I am spending personalized time with them and walking them through and showing more examples, having them possibly work as collaborative as they can, 3 to 6 feet away. and then I switched that into the third session of it. So then now I have independent practice happening in front of me in the class, and I am working with the remote kids through via Zoom, giving the same instruction. So it's a variance of kind of how do I work with both at the same time, not having them possibly on the whole time with direct Zoom, but asking them to do a variance of all of them together. And then really this is more of a 5-6 model where I get to, and this is a lot of words on a page, but I'm going to credit Dr. Nikki Rowe, who is a very strong instructor herself and is giving me an example of what it might look like in a different day for this. And again, it's a variant of what I just said, 20 to 30 minutes, reinforcing second step to start the day with their whole class. A class comprehension lesson, 20 to 30 minutes. And then you will see intro to group 2, 20 minutes, independent work for the other group happening, and then 20 to 30 minutes in small group, group 1, group 2, and then minutes group 4, independent. So you vary your groups, you do some online, you have some working independently, and you continue while students are in small groups. They are meeting with the teachers. Other work groups are working independently with reading activities. And you can see how this goes on throughout the day. It's a continual structure of moving the group. You'll see the whole day done here. And then once class instruction is done, they have unified arts, and then what you need time also in a day. That's a quick overview, really, Andy, of kind of looking at that. In concurrent instruction, it doesn't mean that kids for 6.5 hours are all together the same working step and track with stand and deliver. There's variance in activities by our teachers. There's small group instruction. There's certain groups are working independently. Certain groups are working via Zoom directly with the teachers. Others are going off and doing independent work throughout the day. And it varies based on the activity you're doing and the time needed for that instruction.
So just before, just to, sorry, John, can I just jump in for one quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, we talked a lot in education about best practice, and I know that no matter what field you're in, there's a best practice. So in education, one of the things that we've learned is best practice is you don't do, or you shouldn't do the same thing all day, every day. So, when I was a student, it was pretty much you sit down, teacher's going to talk at you, you take your notes, the bell rings and you leave. That's not best practice now. That's not a fad. We know that that's really brain-based research. So this, what John's describing, is the pandemic version of best practice. So our teachers know better than anybody that that best practice is not, sitting in front of a camera, for 6 hours if you can avoid it. They're well trained, and also by their nature, we're very lucky in Merrimack. These are people who, by and large, constantly ask, how can we do it better? That's just a fact. They do it all the time. And so this phenomena of being in front of the camera that's part of our proposal should not be taken literally to mean, as John said, just sitting zoning for 6 hours, because everybody knows that's not, best practice. In some cases, that's, how it's evolved because of the pandemic, but there have been efforts put in place by teachers to mitigate that with breaks and so on. And can we get better? Yes, we continue to try that. But anyway, I just want to point out that, what John's talking about isn't really revolutionary in the sense that we're constantly evolving our understanding about best practice. And this is just in the COVID context.
Thank you, Mark. And that's correct. And this is, again, I think is a good point, best practices and things that we've been working on. We've had a 90-minute instructional template going back almost 18 years at the elementary level. This is nothing new to have small group, mixed large group, independent practice, reshuffle the groups, do time for conferring, do time for word study and word work. This is, again, this has just been adapted to be able to work with 2 groups at the same time and concurrent learning, but it's still best practices prevail. And again, I think that, this is a 120-minute template. Again, I'll post these tomorrow for those to get more information on these, but this is nothing that's been created in Merrimack. This is an online template from Caitlin Tucker that I did some research on and looked at what are some best practices out there. And again, I got a short little, hope it plays, but just kind of it's kind of cool, and I'll use that term, that we have a teacher, Mr. Hill at the middle school, who's already done some work to try out his camera, and it's narrated by our assistant principal, Sean DeMore, a little bit, but I'll just give you, it's not long, but it's just a window into the future, maybe, or maybe not.
So here is the camera in Mr. Hill's classroom being operated. Explain, go ahead.
So 1 goes to the front of the classroom, which is the whiteboard.
Yep.
2 goes to the left side.
Okay.
And 3 goes to the right side. But then you can also go all the way around.
Oh, look at this.
And it will go 360.
Yeah. Well, it goes.
Well,
so it's not a long video, but it just shows the camera in the middle and a student who is actually operating it for the educator as he's teaching the classroom. And Mrs. DeMore walked in for a typical walkthroughs and said, oh, look at this. And we have a student who has to be home. So we're allowing that student to be part of the classroom right now as we learn and test out. Just a credit to Mr. Hill, because we're doing this, and he was able to already go kind of a tips and things to know about using the camera that he put out to myself and Nancy Rose, and she's sharing that with all technicians, and we're going to incorporate that into part of our training in the upcoming weeks if we decide to move forward. And that would be, I'll stop my share. And that's just a little bit of a kind of how would it look, a little more of in the day in the life, and that we're starting to play and test a little bit right now. If I can answer any more questions, I'm willing to.
So Cinda, just so closing this up and then I'll stop. It's same topic. So one of the things that I had questions about and the concerns that we've heard are, if a student is at home and doesn't, I mean, if you're going to structure all 4 days so that they blend the camera with the in-person instruction and the remote, do you envision that all of a sudden we're going to double what we did during the first semester, or is it going to be a paced back so that when there are days in person, there's a certain percent that they're involved in a day of remote? So it's maybe they increase by 20 or 30% over what they would in the first semester, because I think there's a concern that kids are going to get overwhelmed either with their ability to self-motivate or self-attend when they're by themselves during the day, or how much parents need to be involved more than they did previously, because people want improved instruction, but they also don't want the kids to be buried by technology requirements, or the parents have to get more involved in helping during those days. So I guess you don't have to answer it now. It's just a concern that I've heard.
No, I can answer, Andy. I'm
Okay.
certainly willing to, because I think that there is a bit of this that I have learned, having been in the district for a long time now, that I have some faith in our educators to understand the scope and sequence engaging of their students' progress. I mean, back to Mark's point about best practice. Best practice isn't just to forge ahead, no matter where your class is. Best practice is to constantly assess and know the pace of your class and where you can go and how fast you can go within that. We spent Matt can give you the number of hours we spent this summer working on groups and task force to develop essential learning competencies across our district. And those are on our website and they're posted, and we've worked with our ELCs to line up and align what we're teaching per quarter. So those are still in place. We'll be able to go a little deeper and a little more to knowledge knowing that those are still in place and that we're basing it on. Will it probably move quicker than it has? Well, of course, we're having double the instructional time. Will it be a double of that? Well, maybe not necessarily, but maybe so if kids get it and we can progress as far as we go. It's going to be based on the knowledge of our students and the ability for our students and our teachers to work collaboratively together and continue to grow. I think that there is going to be no formula. It's going to be based on the instructional practice and the amount, but they have a guiding template of the instructional ELCs to guide them along the way all year long.
Hey, John, you made a comment about the amount of time spent. Let me just kind of give it some context. You know, the amount of time spent as far as planning and preparation was well over 4,000 man hours during the summertime and the beginning of the school year, and it still kind of continues. But it was quite the group effort involving a number of educators and principals and assistant principals across the district.
Lori?
So I'm happy to hear that there's going to be a lot of professional development around the rollout of the cameras and the new system that we're putting in place. There is school districts right now doing this system, and there has been some data that shows there's been some success, but I think it's going to be critical to continue with professional development. And again, you know, my personal hope is that we're going to phase in getting kids back to school in the classroom with a teacher when it's possible. I really feel strongly about that. You know, I'm just, you know, Dr. Fauci, we've used him, you know, many times. We talk about him many times. For the better part of a year, we've been advised to listen to Dr. Fauci, and he couldn't be more clear that he really is pushing for our schools to reopen. And so I just want to keep that in everyone's forefront, that we do want to eventually get to all of our schools being reopened.
Jenna.
Okay, I have a lot of notes. I have a lot of notes. I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know if they're questions as much as they are just kind of thoughts, but I'm so grateful, first of all, not for my dog. I'm sorry about that, but I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have had a little time between the proposal and today to think through what the questions I even have are, what are the concerns, and be able to talk to people, because, you know, I mean, I can sort of have a knee-jerk thoughts to myself, but I don't know who in the community shares my thoughts, or, we only get the emails that we get, right? So I can read the emails and think that represents everybody, but then I've had the opportunity to go and talk to other people and listen to other people and hear other people's concerns. And, and some of them mirrored my concerns. So I'm just going to kind of talk about sort of my concerns. There's no doubt that many people in the community have been asking for more instructional time, more direct instruction. And I certainly understand why, and I don't think anybody doesn't understand why. My concerns with this particular plan are a few different things. One of my questions / concerns is workload. So I know that there are kids that probably don't do much on their independent learning days, that, that's probably a reality. But I also know there's other kids that, work a lot on those days, and they're working on long-term projects, and they're working the majority of the days. And, I'm talking to people, and their kids are doing that, and my kids are doing that, and I'm seeing that. And so our concern is and I have to assume, like you said, because teachers are very good at what they do, that workload would switch. Because one of my biggest concerns, honestly, is, So they're going to go to school 2 in-person days, but then they're going to be on Zoom at the end of 2 days. And in my experience, in talking to students and just in looking at it in my own house and talking to parents and of friends and whatever, is that at the end of a day of Zoom, and I mean, I experienced it, you know, we experienced it as adults, is at the end of a day of Zoom, you've about had it with anything that requires your attention. And so we're going to ask these kids to go to 2 days of 90-minute classes on Zoom, and then they're going to have a whole bunch of homework that night then too, where they have to possibly be in front of a screen, they're working on projects, whatever, when they've about had it. You know, another concern is, I think the type A kids, the kids that are on it, the kids that are driven, the kids that are going to succeed no matter what, they'll continue to do well because they will make anything work, right? And the kids that we are already losing are not going to be jumping onto a Zoom 2 days a week. I feel like we're going to continue to lose those kids. And I don't think I'm saying anything that we don't all know, right? My concern is that those kids that are teetering on the edge that we've got right now, because at least on the independent learning days, they can make their schedule and they can get their work done. And maybe their parents or their teachers have to nag them to pull it over the finish line, but they're just barely making it. If we ask those kids to then get on a Zoom for 2 days, they're going to be like, I'm done. I can't. Peace out. I'm finished. Like, and I think that that's a very real issue. Like, I feel like we run the risk of alienating the just hanging on, or the, I mean, I'm making this work, but I'm really struggling population. Do you know what I'm saying? So I do worry about that, because I hear from teachers, there's kids that do show up in person, but when it's remote, they just don't show up. So if we are providing 50% in theory of the instruction on via Zoom, then the kids who just don't show up when there's Zoom, we've lost them. Like, they're gone. And at least now with the hybrid model, they go to school there 2 days, and independent learning, may have to nag them and do remediation plans and all these things to get them to get their work in. But we stand a fighting chance if they're missing 50% of their instruction because they're not showing up, which I'm hearing from teachers, like, they're literally reaching out to these kids and they're not responding, and they're not getting on Zooms during remote periods. That is very concerning to me. Like, I'm very concerned about the kids who absolutely would have graduated from high school, but this pandemic has put them on the brink. And then this next thing is going to maybe be the thing to sink them. Not only that, but asking them to just make another transition to a whole nother model that isn't back to in-person. Like, I feel like these kids can absolutely pivot tomorrow to going back in person because that's their normal. That's what they know. That's like putting their comfy slippers back on, right? But to ask them to now pivot to a whole nother thing when they maybe have just finally gotten into a routine, I've heard that from parents. Like, we have finally figured out how to make these independent working days work. Our kids are in a routine. Please don't upset the apple cart now. And I understand that. And I guess I kind of feel like tonight I have to be a voice for some of those opposing views, right? Because we hear so much of these parents that absolutely want, they want more instructional hours. They want kids, they want double instructional hours. They want all of that. And listen, I understand it. I want a lot of things. I want a lot of things too. What about labs for science? The 90-minute blocks, how are you going to do a lab for science in person? And then 50% of the class isn't in the room. Are you going to redo the lab the next day? And then I know I'm throwing a lot of thoughts out there. So I'm just going to throw all my thoughts out there, and then you guys can respond to whatever. This is no way a concern about teachers. I know that teachers will drop dead before they'll fail. I just know that. And I want teachers that are listening to hear that loud and clear. I believe in you. I believe in them. But I also think we're asking them to do what is, it's crazy. I think it's crazy. Like, Lori's right. It will require a lot of professional development. And my next question is, when are we going to do that? And I mean it in all sincerity. Like, these teachers are burned out and they're trying their best to get by. And I'm really concerned that we are going to continue to ask more and more and more and more of them. And I'm just not, I feel like we might be pushing everybody right over the edge, students and teachers, honestly. My notes are so scattered. Let me look. Oh, one other thing I want to say is whatever model we move forward with, Dr. McLaughlin, I heard you say something like, well, if it needs to be built in to be able to pivot to in-person learning when that's possible, we can do that. And what I would say to that is, yes, please, absolutely, without question, whatever plan moves forward, please let it be able to pivot to in-person if and when that becomes possible. I feel like the plan always should have been that way. And I feel like it absolutely needs to be, because with vaccines on the horizon and good weather, possibly, there is the chance at some point that can happen. And what we don't want to do is make a plan that makes that not possible or more stressful for everybody involved. So I would certainly ask for that to be the case. I don't know. I think I just said everything.
So so that's a lot. And
it is a lot.
I don't know if there's a specific question that you want us to address, or are you asking us to just take those concerns under? Because let me just tell you, when you say, you want to be a voice for people with those concerns, I don't want to give people the impression that we don't hear them too. I mean, oh, yeah. I know, everything that you're saying is, we've heard a lot. And so, nothing is a surprise to me that you've said. So I guess I don't know how to respond. I mean, do you
I don't necessarily need a response as much as I think I wanted to say that as an explanation for why I don't know how supportive I am of this. I don't know if this is what I want to move forward with personally, like if my vote would be to move forward with this, or for just to remain in the hybrid plan as it is until the point when we can go fully in person. I don't know. Yeah,
well, what I would say back, just broadly, is that you have just articulated the, basically the rock and a hard place that schools find themselves in since the beginning of this. So remember that this plan was put forward because there was more than a little expression of a need for more instructional time. That's where that came from. And so, we also said that we don't feel that we can support a plan at the moment, given the realities that we're facing, that brings 5 through 12 back full time. Now, that's the point of departure number one. We're struggling with K to 4. So we're telling you, but we think we can pull that off at some point. Not necessarily immediately, as the plan proposed said, but at some point. But I don't see it right now. Not talking about March or April, talking about right now. So how do you square that circle? We want to do better with instruction, and we can't bring those students back and be safe, or pretend even to be safe. So therein lies the problem. Now, the way that we've tried to address that is by providing more opportunities for students to be connected to their class. We hear a lot about social emotional. We hear a lot about isolation. There's a way, so that was a list of things that could go wrong. There are also, theoretically, a list of things that could go right. Connecting back with your class is one. And having more time with your teacher. This is just a proposal, and we will do what the board recommends. And if the board recommends hybrid, so be it. But I just want to remind people that there was a reason that we were trying to move to a different plan. But like everything, there are some downsides. I think the thing that I could address most confidently in what you said, Janet, is that you're describing a scenario where there's a cup and we keep pouring water in the cup, and the teachers aren't noticing that the cup is getting full, and then more and more and more. And now the cup is overflowing and nobody's noticing. And the cup is just draining. That is not typically how our teachers behave. And so the scenario you described about a student being overwhelmed happens every day in a non-pandemic situation now for any number of reasons. And a good teacher knows that. And they are trained to observe that. We're not as great at it as we ought to be, but we're better than we used to be. And so, you know, I wouldn't assume that there are students who on a normal non-pandemic day don't have enough. And teachers are pretty good at using their resources to figure out that's what differentiated instruction is all about. So I would expect and have reason to be confident in that expectation that in this new mode, that's intention is good. The intention is to bring students more in connection with each other as a cohort class and more in connection with their content, that a teacher will use whatever signals they get to address those problems as they emerge. One trigger would be non-attendance. We have systems in place right now when a student goes dark for a period of time. We don't just, come to it 6 weeks later and say, gosh, we haven't seen, Mark in a while. We're on that. And then the question then becomes, why haven't we seen Mark in a while? Is everything okay? Is Mark working because the family's lost income? Or is Mark just totally out of sorts? Or babysitting his brothers and sisters? Or just not good on camera? And we have evidence of each of our buildings really tracking that down. So the premise of your concern is like, this is all going to happen and it's going to go unnoticed. And that's just not our practice in normal times, and even less so now. And I would just point out also, and again, my goal is to present a plan, not to advocate. That's really, but I just want to try to alleviate at least some of the concerns so that you might feel better about contemplating this, if not deciding it. But we have, what we've kind of loosely termed Operation Rescue at the high school right now, where we have specifically identified all the students who were in danger of failing at first semester. And a plan has been developed for them. A contract has been developed for them. And we have hired somebody to call each and every family to be sure that they know about the contract, they know about the terms, and those terms haven't been to remediate every last thing that you have failed, but to try to identify those critical competencies that if you passed, you could, pass. And so, so we're not just creating a system where we say, oh, well, Mark failed, too bad, so sad. We really are trying to create systems that can catch those people. And that's not just words, that's actual stuff that's been happening, since just shortly after our return from holiday break. And I think we've had some considerable success, with that. So the scenario you described is kind of based on, nobody noticing a problem and nobody willing to do anything about it. And, or, theoretically, like that's when you suggest the concerns, I get that, but it's predicated on a reality that I don't think we have here. And so if a teacher were to start to see a student suffering as a result of this plan, our practice would be to take a break and to connect. And that's what we do in non-pandemic times, and there'd be no reason we wouldn't do that now. So I'm not advocating, I'm just trying to provide a way to think about this that isn't necessarily as dire.
Two quick things, just in response. I didn't mean at all to insinuate that I didn't think you weren't noticing or whatever. I knew about the rescue plan for the high school. I know how well it's working. I know people involved in it. So I know you guys are doing a great job. I guess what I'm saying is if you add another 200 kids to that, or 100 kids, or however many might tip over the edge now, right? It's another huge number of kids you're going to have to put on that rescue plan, another bunch of workload of kids you're trying to help carry the load so that they can just get where they need to be. That was my concern, not that you're not doing absolutely everything, because I know you are, and the school district are, and teachers are, and everybody. I know that that's a great program and they're doing great things and helping families in meaningful ways. I'm just saying, if you add to that population, I'm concerned about that. And the last thing I'll just say is, just to sort of sum up my thoughts, is that there's a very specific way to excellently teach in person. And I think there's a very specific way to teach excellently remote. I think they're two very different things. And I think the way you really engage students remotely and the way you really engage students in person they're very different. And I'm not saying educators can't bridge that gap. Man, they can. Anybody can do it. Educators can do it. I'm just saying that I'm afraid that if we move forward with this model, when everybody sort of actually has their mojo going on and they finally know the routine, they're good with it, and everybody's finally moving forward and making some progress. My fear is that by combining those two things, we lose the benefits of both of those different kinds of instruction. And the benefit I'm not sure the benefits outweigh the stress that might be put on students and teachers and maybe even parents by putting them into this new model. I'm not, and let me say up front, I am so grateful that you gave us the option to talk about what this looks like, because I think sometimes you say, oh, we want this, and then you get it and you're like, wait a second, like, and I don't know that I ever said, like, I think we should have 4 days of instruction. I'm just saying that I'm glad you worked on this. I'm glad you came and gave us a plan. I am not sure, these are my concerns. That's it.
Lori.
So, Jenna, I think that it's really important to have this dialogue and to discuss. I do remember the board asking the superintendent to come forward with a plan to increase instruction. And I know that this is not going to be perfect. I know that it's really complex. What you said is absolute. That's why I asked John about professional development, and I appreciate your response on saying, do we have time for all of this in-person professional development? It's unprecedented times, and so it's probably not going to be ideal, but will it improve students' ability to have contact with their teachers? And so that's, I know it's not going to be probably perfect the first time we roll this out. We have to be prepared for that. There is going to be some unintended consequences. But it's going to be a fast learning model, but I think it will, definitely serve some of our students. And I hear all of your concerns, because some students are turning off and they are not engaged, and those are all things that are real. So anyway, I do appreciate your opinions.
Shannon.
Thank you. Thoughts I had were, I think that, introducing the camera, having a plan to expand instruction, that's all great things. Now, again, the cameras came because we used our CARES Act funding for that. So, not taxpayer money, but in response to how are we going to diversify instruction under less than ideal educational circumstances. So my thought on that, I think it's a valuable tool that can be used for good, but with the flexibility that, and again, the one thing I want to say is, as a board, I appreciate everything that they've done, or as a board member, I've appreciated everything that they've done. I've appreciated the ideas they've come up with. And I think that, as a board, we need to offer flexibility and latitude to any implementation. So if they say, the cameras and doing the 4 days of instruction may not be ideal, but having 2 days of instruction with the cohort in class, having that same cohort, say CD, get the in-person instruction, the same lesson plans from Monday, Tuesday, go to Wednesday, Thursday to the other half, but any student can tune in to get reinforcement with the cameras. give them whatever flexibility that they need to get the job done, and set realistic goals under the environment that we have. So, the one thing I don't want to do is, as a board, and as a board member, I don't want to encourage that they have to check with us every time they do a lesson plan and how they're going to get that accomplished. Because again, although we do have trained teachers at the table, it's not our purview to design and deliver instruction. We're here to provide an environment via funding, via policy that allows them to navigate and do so. So again, I'm glad we have the ideas. I'm glad we're using this opportunity in these board meetings to communicate how to do so, and what the intent is. But I think what we need to do is say, at the end of the day, the goal of the board under these conditions is for you to deliver the best quality education you can under the circumstances in which we are navigating. And today it's, hybrid. I think every board member said we want to be back in school. And I think every board member would never want to left school, have had students leave school. I don't think anyone on this meeting, anyone in this town, anyone in this state, this country would have wanted us to have this concern in front of us. But this is where we're at. We do have a hybrid model that is not unique. There are hybrid models all over the country. There are hybrid models, all across our region. Are there people that are doing full remote? Yes. Are there people doing full in person? Yes. And we are what I would say in a happy medium environment. But whatever we do, I think that, when it comes to it, we need the flexibility to be able to deliver the maximum output that we can under the circumstances. And if this proposal works, that's ideal. If it means that the cohort gets more instruction, I think that's what you guys want to, from an administrative perspective. If the consequences are greater than the gains, be able to pivot without having a special board meeting to pivot. Because at the end of the day, when a student gets a grade, it's not going to have our name on the report card. Any one of the 5 of us, it won't be on the report card. When the diploma comes, it won't have us on the diploma. It will have our superintendent and our principal. So we have to give them the latitude. We're not here to be educators. We're here to be a governing body of an educational institution. I just want us to always keep that in mind, and try not to get too far into the weeds to the point where they are so constrained by our expectations that they cannot accomplish the goals set forth. So that's my thought on this. So what you need to do, if this proposal does that for you, that's great. If this proposal is because we have created an almost too much of a, what's what I'm looking for, directive on how to do your job, I would just like to apologize, because that's not what I think this board should be doing. Because at the end of the day, we're not measured for your success. We measure you on outcomes. And for us to tell you how to do that as a lay board, because even if we're instructors by trade, which we have a couple here again, we're not at the table every day with our own students. So those are my thoughts. Don't know if they're worth 2 cents, but that I had to kind of share that out. But let us know what you need. Let us know if this plan works for you. Let us know if this plan doesn't work for you. Let us know if you're forced into this plan because we were kept putting too much pressure to get it done. Because again, sometimes, change for the change's sake is not necessarily of benefit. So those are the things I was thinking about as you were presenting the last week and this week. But if it's working for you, let's give it a try. If you need more time than the time that you were presenting, I think that's totally appropriate. And then just let us know what you need from us to help you to maximize your success.
Thank you.
All right, Andy?
So I want to make sure it's clear in case people were thinking something different. I was not ever advocating for double the instruction or anything like that, which is one of the reasons I asked the question about what a day in the life was going to be, because what I heard from parents initially as we went through the fall semester was they wanted an opportunity for more instruction, not double instruction, not to speed up by 2 times or anything like that. And the idea of having cameras in the room could augment that capability. So in many ways, I agree with some of the stuff Shannon said in terms of providing the flexibility to utilize this technology and work within the different grades, the different classes, the different cohorts of students for what makes sense to help them get the additional support they need. If it means that a cohort can learn more things because they're all flying along pretty well, then so be it. But I also don't want to penalize the kids that don't work well remote and don't have the ability to do it, and all of a sudden put them behind an 8 ball they weren't at the day before or in the previous one. I think everybody on this board wants us to move forward. I think everybody wants us eventually to get back into school, but when that happens, it's anybody's guess at this point. So my vision of this whole thing was to provide an additional tool, be able to get creative with the way that things are done during this 4-day, hybrid model, improve what you can, but do what makes sense. Use some logic. I mean, if it ever came across that I personally was dictating double this or specific things, that was never the intent. It was to get the creative juices flowing across administration and staff to say, how can we improve things with these sort of capabilities? How can we take advantage? Because I think we all would like to get things moving a little bit better than they were, but not also overwhelming, so that when we get to the point, if we're able to bring kids back into the classroom, we're moving a little faster than we were previously, right? So for me, that's what I wanted to say. I think that my personal belief is I envision us supporting administration to utilize this technology and improve instruction, but I certainly would not say double it. I don't have any expectation of what that bar is. I don't want to create a bar. I don't want to create some sort of a standard. I want to say, use your judgment as administrators as to what you can do at the different grade levels and use it to as good as you can without jeopardizing the quality or the mental health stress of the students. So I know it's not a specific answer, but there's got to be common sense involved in this as well. So.
Lori?
So I just want to go back to something Shannon said, and she was talking about the duty of the school board. And the school board serves as representatives and advocates for their community, prioritizing the needs and interests of students. And our job is to have students have the best possible experience and outcomes. And I just think that that's something that we really need to always consider. Students first, and what are the best possible outcomes for students.
Shannon?
Under no circumstances has that ever not been the case. Just wanted to make that very clear.
So, Lori, did you have something else?
I didn't hear what she said.
Under no circumstances has that ever not been the case with my service on the board. Thank you.
So I haven't weighed in yet, and I'm going to provide, my opinion. And I certainly am very thankful for administration for coming forward with this, because we are in a time of ever-changing, I would say, optimizing what we need to do and lessons learned. And we have tools available now that we didn't have before. So I agree with Shannon in the sense of, not letting administration deal with how to implement that for as we build in more opportunity for engagement with our students, and how we enhance the learning experience using these tools, as well as our teachers. So, to your same question, if this plan affords that opportunity, then I absolutely support it. I'm excited about the tools. I hear nothing but great things from other districts about Canvas and about being able to use these tools in order to optimize learning. And I think to be able to increase engagement. So, there's always those situations where, let's say you have a student in group A, hybrid group A, they go 2 days for school and then they go MIA for 3 days. So if this helps engage and bring them back into the classroom and feel part of a school community, there's a myriad of different situations happening with kids, right? No two kids are alike. No two kids' experiences are alike. There's some patterns that we've seen, and there's certainly all sorts of challenges, but no two families' challenges are alike. So ultimately, if this allows us to be able to improve our learning for our learners, I'm absolutely supportive. It's Jenna.
Oh God. Oh, I can't figure out how to get myself off of mute. You know, I'm absolutely 100% thrilled we have this technology. I think we should absolutely use it in any possible way to enhance teaching. I'm not against that at all. What my reservations are about are specific to this very specifics of this plan, which is 2 days in, 2 days in the case of, you know, high school where you're in class basically remotely, you know, two days, and then you have that Flex Friday. I have concerns about that specific plan, the technology and the myriad ways it can be used to enhance education. I'm thrilled with. So just to clarify.
I do have a question regarding the Flex Day. If you could just reiterate how you see the Flex Day working again.
So I'm going to let John tackle that, but I'll just sort of lead by saying that some of the conversation tonight has almost, at least in my world, has almost proven the point about the need for it. Because let's remember that in non-pandemic time, teachers have this planning time. So what we're really asking is to just let teachers have the time that they have always had. It's just that it looks like it's different or extra or more because we're calling it out on a certain day. But they've always had this time, and it's been provided by the way that we schedule things like Unified Arts and other things. But I think some have mistakenly, maybe in the community, have mistakenly thought that this is like, you know, give the teachers a break. This is not a give the teachers a break time. What did we talk about just tonight? We've talked about being able to assess a student's, you know, strengths or vulnerabilities. We've been talking about looking at a student as a person and not a number, and trying to figure out how are they doing right now? Are they thriving? Are they wilting? All of that happens by virtue of the common planning time that people have. And in Merrimack, you know, we've worked on that for years. John remembers when he was a principal, developing, you know, using work from the Do-Fors and professional learning teams. And we've continued to, you know, perfect that over time. So that planning time is intended to provide an opportunity for teachers to get together and to literally look at data from everything from attendance to behavior to performance, academic performance, and to be able to see, well, you know, I'm noticing that in my class, are you noticing that in yours? Or, you know, seems to be fine here, but let's get the guidance counselor in because there seem to be some moments where there are triggers. What are those triggers? Let's get that person. That doesn't happen, you know, by magic. You've all talked about the cameras and where are we going to find professional development time. Time is a critical thing. So remember that where is the time spent or provided for teachers to investigate the needs of children? They always have had that time. We're not asking for anything they haven't already had. But in the way that the current schedules are working out, with some teachers dedicated to remote instruction, some teachers dedicated to in-person instruction, some students who are fully remote, some students who are hybrid or potentially full-time, the scarcity of resources to provide coverage for that planning time, because our UA people are covering both remote and hybrid because we don't have a specially remote phys ed teacher or a specially remote art teacher. So they're stretched thin, and what gets lost in that is the ability to provide the cover of that planning time. So
Mark, real quick. So I was trying to get a perspective just from the student's perspective. So is it essentially remaining unchanged from how we are right now?
So let's talk to Jim.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark. Very thorough there with that perspective. I wanted to, that's where I was going to go. Cinda was really with the students and what it looks like for their day. One of the things that was mentioned earlier was our little how to help students recover and a little lifeline at the high school for those kids that had struggled in the first quarter and into the first semester. And Fridays, all of those students who did have an F and signed their contract and made an agreement with the teacher have individual meetings. So students have an opportunity to sit one-on-one with their teachers or two-on-one and recover some of the needed assignments that may have been missed. That's one aspect of what a Friday at a high school will look like. Two, we're doing a lot, like for example, the band meets on Friday. So we have an opportunity for that to happen on Friday for students who play in band to come in large group, use a gymnasium, use large spaces and spread out and still stay safe and get that requirement. We're utilizing it for a lot of our special ed therapies and our special ed groupings that happen on Friday, an opportunity for that to happen for them. We're utilizing it for just kids that want to meet and have time with their teachers. There's scheduled appointments throughout the day for times for that to happen for teachers, for kids at the high school. At the middle school, similarly, that we are working with kids in smaller group. There's time for their advisory to meet and talk to their advisory person and have some time with them. There's time for groups with our guidance department. There's time for, again, individual instruction. There's times for some, as we move forward. I talked to Principal Carragher today, and they were talking about some enrichment activities for kids as they move forward on Fridays and providing opportunities to do things like photo club or music club or things like that that allow them an opportunity. We haven't had much opportunity after school this year, you have to remember, because the fact that in the afternoon, we are cleaning and sanitizing and fogging our rooms. And so things end at the end of the day right now. And that's it. So that's a very different thing. You all know and can remember how active Merrimack schools are in the afternoon. Those aren't happening right now. So we're utilizing Friday for some of those activities and moving forward doing there. Our Real Academy also is doing a lot of that work with individual instruction during that time also. So it's really, I wish the term, we called it flex day to start, but it's not as flexible as it used to be. We've gained and filled it with a lot of opportunities for kids, a lot of opportunities for professional development, a lot of opportunities for collaboration and data collection. So it's kind of got a combination of those three things happening every Friday.
Thank you. Andy?
So we've talked a lot amongst all of us during this meeting, as well as heard input from parents. And I had to ask myself, I had to go back and say, what is the proposals on the table for 5 through 12? And the core parts of the proposal are that the two cohorts are combined, or the cohorts are combined. So there's 2 days of in-person instruction and 2 days of remote instruction, essentially. That's part of it. And the other part that we didn't talk about is the impact to the remote students given this change. Because a lot of the input we've gotten as board members is also the impact that this would have on what remote students are doing. So before we go any further, can you talk really quick about the difference of what the real program would look like versus what it is today and the impacts it would have on students?
Yep. There was a whole slide on the presentation, and I can certainly talk more about it now too. And it was in both the presentation and the plan. But I can just recap. Pretty much what would happen is cohorts would combine. It'd be 4 days of instruction and Friday with individual needs. So it would look very similar to what's going on, except it would all be remote. All 4 days, they would have their cohorts combined, and instruction would happen throughout the 4 days. With, as I described earlier, with varying methods, but the class would be together, both cohorts C and D throughout the 4 days. That's the proposal.
I'm curious as to other board members and their thoughts about the impact of remote students as part of this. I know, Jenna, you've had some specific opinions about the in-person cohort model. Have you heard any input from your side about the impact that this change would have on the remote students?
What I would say to that is I think their concerns are the same as everybody else's, which is finally their kids are in a routine, they've got it, it's working for them, and they don't necessarily want a change right now unless that change is for their kid to be back in school full time, which, obviously people that are remote don't necessarily want that option, as long as we have the remote option, but there may be people who do want that, but what I'm hearing from those people is just the same, like 2 days of Zoom, great. Thank God they have those independent learning. I'm not sure that they want 4 days of Zoom, but obviously within that population, you're going to have varying opinions.
I would just say, if I may, like, it sounds like there's nothing that, mandates from what we've been talking about that students have to sit 4 full days on Zoom. I think it seems to me that it gives teachers extra flexibility to manage their class in a way that, they may be able to take a break to go work on an assignment and then come back and revisit and have some, versus, getting, spoken to. I think, for all those hours, it gives a chance to kind of do workshops and come back and keep engaged 4 days out of the week and manage around that. I mean, that's kind of how I see the strength of the program, in the sense that it's not here, these are your 2 days, and now you don't have those 2 days. It's now you don't have 3 days or whatever. It gives a chance to teachers to have some flexibility and administration to have some flexibility in how they manage that time based on this new tool. But that's just how I see it. I mean, that's what I feel like I'm hearing.
I think that is accurate.
Can I go back to, may I speak? Can I go back to a specific question, I guess, that I did have about workload? If kids are in school full day, 2 days, and then I guess I don't necessarily understand the flexibility piece, because it, when, like for the high school, for example, John put it up that they're going to have, periods 1, 3, 5, and 7 or whatever. So they'll be in school on Zoom. Obviously, the teacher has control of how long of the 90 minutes they're on Zoom or off Zoom to work on independent things. But in theory, they get up at at when school starts, and they're done when school ends, and they're on a schedule, and they're participating remotely. So they have those 2 days after participating. So like on all 4 of those days, then you've got groups that are remote. So then what is the workload going to look like? Because I know, a lot of the assignments have been shifted to these long-term projects or whatever, but you're going to have half the class always on Zoom. What is the workload as far as like homework, for lack of a better term, out of classwork, extra work? Will that shift too? What will that look like? Will there be, I feel like I'm asking a stupid question, and yet I feel like it has to be asked. Like, will there be that front of the mind, presence of mind? Like, okay, like half of these kids literally were on Zoom all day. They may be all out of attention. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
so I would, no, it's not a stupid question at all. None of this is. I think this is really good, and I hope that there are a lot of people in the community that are listening, because it's a lot of, careful dialogue, and, we've been through this before. I think a couple of things that I'd say, and I invite John to speak too. So I just want to reiterate that, what I've tried to say is that teachers are trained to know, generally when a student is reaching a point of no return. That sometimes it's harder on Zoom to see that, admittedly. When you're a teacher and you're live with the student, you can look at their eyes. You can see whether they're, bouncing their knee so much, and you're like, that's a sign. So there are 1,000 things that teachers look at, and it's harder, clearly, on Zoom. But, this isn't our first rodeo. We've been doing this with a lot of students for some time. And I would go back to Jenna, to the idea that teachers know to look for these signs. They do. And so if you're asking, will there be any time when somebody will miss such a sign, I can't guarantee that that won't happen. But as a general rule, do teachers know what to look for when a student is overwhelmed? They do now. It happens every day in a normal non-COVID environment. So if anything, we're more heightened to that than we have ever been. The second thing relative to workload and homework, now that's kind of an interesting thing, and I really don't wish to bring up a subject from the past, but you know Merrimack's position on homework is that it is provided as a tool for practice. And it's up to the student to decide whether or not they need that practice. That's something that's been adjudicated, quite famously for some time a while ago. So teachers provide homework opportunities so that students can take some responsibility, particularly older students, to say, okay, if I feel like I need to do work on this to get better at it, here is work provided by my teacher to do that. And if I don't feel the need to do it, then I won't. And in Merrimack, that practice is not held against a student. And so just as a particular, point of reflection, COVID hasn't changed any of that. That is still, a sort of a kind of a communication between a teacher and a student as to, what I think you might need to do to get a little better at this thing. But it all can't be on the teacher. It sometimes has to be on the student, particularly the older you get, to decide whether I need it. And if you don't, then take the consequences for not being prepared. You were given the opportunity and take, we are well aware that right now we've got to balance the need to expose students to instruction and content. But that's got to be balanced by the fact that students, many of them, are struggling with isolation and all of the other terrible outcomes from COVID. And so, once again, if I say the word balance once, I say it a million times, but what I feel like people are asking for is just make it be just the way it was. But right now it can't be. And so we can't be all in on instruction to the point where we bury kids, but we can't be so into the social emotional well-being of a student that we end up the year with no instruction. So we are well aware of the need to strike that balance. So I wouldn't say that this proposal, suddenly is an awakening for us that, oh, now this is a problem we've got to address. We've known this since the beginning. And I think it's been a source of frustration for some who think that we've tilted too much on the side of, conservative and not being back in, class full time and maybe, being too touchy-feely and worrying about kids' feelings. But then on the other hand, some people say we're not nearly as in touch with students' feelings and their emotions as relate to the experience of the pandemic as we should. And we're too, learning. And so, and to that I'd say you're all right. There is no proper balance possible right now that doesn't mean there's a little bit of a give and take. I wish to God there were. I really do, for the sake of students. And right now, we can tweak this, and then that means that's a little bit tougher, or tweak that, and that's a little bit tougher. That's just the reality that we're all facing. So that's a typically long-winded way for me to address the point that you raised, which is that you're worried about workload, so are we. And I would say finally that the best way, and this is not a punt, though it may sound like a punt, but there is a leap of faith that we all have to take at some point. I think right now, and I go back to what Fern Seiden, our social emotional, our system of care coordinator said some time ago, what people hate more than anything is uncertainty and lack of control. And right now, COVID has created uncertainty and lack of control. And so we're presenting a plan that we haven't done before. And that means people have questions. Well, how will the work be? Will there be two? And it's not a dumb question. It's a perfectly reasonable question. And sometimes the answer has to be, I don't know entirely. There has to be a leap of faith, and we have to, do our due diligence to make sure that we've thought of as many things as we can. And then we have to just kind of do it, see where the strengths of the plan are, see where the problems of the plan are, and try to be flexible in correcting them, as we go. And so that's the thing that feels like a punt, but I can just tell you that's like, the reality is we're living it, which is that some things can't be perfectly answered. They're gonna have to be like true, like a true learning moment. We have to do it and then do our best to respond to it.
Any other questions? Any motions? Shannon?
I move that we adopt the grades 5 to 12 plan as presented, with the caveat that the administration has flexibility to modify the plan as it sees appropriate to achieve instructional goals.
Do I have a second? I'll second for discussion.
Need a new laptop. That's my opinion. But
or a new blender. I'm not sure what it is.
It's her laptop acting as a blender, I think is what
Yeah,
it is.
my laptop's kind of on its way out. But so the only thing I would ask with that is, are we comfortable with that start date of 2/15? So I'd be much more comfortable with a 3/1.
I kind of inferred that would be part of the flexibility they would have too. So that's why I use that as an umbrella. So I would say that let's the administration come up with a start date, again, as part of that flexibility in the motion, based upon what they feel will give them the best opportunity to do prep and ramp up with staff to make technology work as well.
So the reason I ask about that is just that there's people at home wanting, some clarity in kind of waiting and watching to see what we're going to say and what they can expect. So I don't.
I guess Mark and John, do you feel like you have an ideal target date? And I'd be glad to amend my motion to include that.
So we're going to make a little sausage here for a minute.
Yeah.
And so, John, if you remember when we presented the plan, part of the reason that we asked the board to consider the 5 through 12 a little sooner is that as we look to second semester, particularly the high school administration, but all of them, but particularly the high school administration would need time to create a schedule that's based on, theoretically, a combined cohort. And so that's the reason that we said if we could get closure on that particular thing, then tomorrow, Mrs. Putney, Mr. Zampieri, Mr. Bergeron, guidance and all that can get to work in doing that, and then having it, ready or close to ready to the beginning of the semester. And remember, we pushed off the start of the semester by a week. So
what are you doing?
If we were to postpone the start date, I think what I would say, and John, I'd like you to weigh in on this, is this.
Let me do it later.
I think what I'd say is this. If we had the flexibility to delay it a little bit past February 8th, let's say, then we do that. But what everybody would need to know is if that's the plan that's voted on, then what would need to happen, I'm assuming, is that the high school administration would have to schedule now as if it's one cohort, and then flex in the and then well, I don't exactly. I mean, I guess this is where I'm a little stuck because now I'm not so sure if it. I think when it starts, it has to just start. John, am I right?
Yes, you are. And I think that this is, there's nothing more that causes stress than change and continual change. So here we are with Mark, used a good term, making sausage, because when you do that, you create change. And I think that we either have to start the second semester with our combined cohorts or stay in our cohort model. And it's got to be one or the other. And I hate to be so defined, but I think the more you change that for an educator to have them plan, you create stress and chaos. And I think that, so if we're going to start it, it needs to start when we start the semester. Question is, can Mark and I go back tomorrow to talk to Sharon and Rich and Pete to say, when do you want the semester to start? And is that going to be, the 8th, or will it be a week later? I think we have to have that conversation. What makes sense to them the more. We already bumped it a week, and we felt that was the flexibility we had at the time. And I'm hearing tonight we might have even more flexibility. So again, ever changing. So that's my 2 cents on it. Either we start in the combined cohort model. We start in the cohort model. We're in the second semester and we stay there, or we start with the Vivio 360s and the concurrent learning, and we have combined start the second semester. It's got to go either way.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's a good. I think for the purposes of the board knowing what we're asking of them, I think that's concrete, right?
And that's all fine. I just, the question is, we're asking a lot of you. So, I think it's fair to ask what date works best for what you're trying to roll out. And if it is as you've rolled it out and what you've put there, not just to appease us, and you feel that that's the date you want to go with, that's great. But I think it's really all about trying to find how we can be most successful.
So I really appreciate that. And what I would say, without having the benefit of, conferring with John, what I would ask the board, if you're giving us that a little bit of a wiggle, then I would say that what would be helpful is the board to vote on the motion as is, and then what we would do is we would talk with administration tomorrow. They are high school administration. They are working. Remember we try to plan for Plan A and Plan B. So they're not. They know that it's possible that the board might vote to approve this tonight. So I know that they've begun work on the idea, like what would happen if they did. And so what I might do is ask for the opportunity to talk to high school administration and ask whether or not they're prepared to rock and roll on February 8th, which was that week extension, or if we would extend first semester by an additional week, for the purposes of just making sure that our plan is solid and then locked in, so that when we do it, we can do it well. It's and so that might be what we would do, but it wouldn't be dependent on this board's motion, other than if the board said that they approved it, then you're saying, I would think that you're allowing us to have that little bit of flexibility, and we'd come right back to the community very, very soon with clarity about whether it would be the 8th or the 15th.
Andy.
So after thinking about this and the pros and cons, I mean, and Mark, it's good to know that you'd reach back to find out what would make sense. The way I look at it is 2 reasons I would support this. One is I believe that we've given administration sort of a direction to allow them to even approach this in a crawl, walk, run. I mean, switch to the model where you combine the cohorts, but don't all of a sudden flip a switch and have like 4 full instruction days on the first day or something like that, but rather start to evolve into it, start increasing as what makes sense based on the cohorts. Because I think the important thing is to, if we're going to make a switch as early as you can into the semester at the beginning of it and stick with it, and then keep the model in place, but the way you implement it and the way you instruct in it sort of evolves and grows based on what you know of the things. To me, that is a prudent way to approach it, because you don't start switching in the middle, you just sort of evolve it, but it still has the same footprint, so to speak. But the other reason that I would be supportive of this is I believe that if we combine the cohorts, if we do get to a point where we can bring students back in, the upper grades, it may be easier to transition this cohort, this model, into a full-time. Let's say we bring the kids back 4 days a week, for example. And look at the K through 4. We've got them 4.5 days a week, current proposal. If we decide to bring the kids back 4 days, they're already in a model where it's sort of treated more as a single cohort rather than the double cohorts the way that it was before. So it would make it easier to transition. So for me, that would be the sort of tipping, if you will, to make this change, is because it would allow us more flexibility. I think it would be more difficult if we tried to take the 2 cohort model and adapt it into kids going back if we wanted to do that more full time. So sort of with everything that we've said and giving administration flexibility to do what they want, but picking the model and sticking to that footprint as we start the second semester is what I could support. So.
My thoughts are then that we would go based on what was planned, because I know that there's parents watching wanting to know how we're going to proceed. And if administration is already prepared to go with this, then that's my thought, is that we would stick with the motion for the date planned.
Can I just offer this one caveat then? If we could, so if the board votes on the motion, and maybe I might just suggest that you ponder this, with adding a potential start date of either February 8th or February 15th. And that would just allow John and I to touch base with high school administration to once more just assess, their readiness for this. And I say that because when we do this, we want to do it right. And I'm confident, reservedly confident, that the 8th, we pushed it to the 8th for a reason, and I'm reservedly confident that it can be that. But if something happened today, in terms of a schedule glitch with Power School or something, and John or I aren't aware of it, that would materially impact our ability to meet that 8th deadline. I'd love the ability to then just be able to say, okay, well, the board in its motion allowed us the 15th. And so that would be the only thing that I might ask, is just that degree of flexibility, including the 8th or the 15th as a start. John, what would you, again, this is the sausage part, but would you support flexibility?
No, I'd support that. I would support that. I think that 8th or 15th, like I said, we had the high school planning, but they were planning on us approving this last week, and we put them behind a week because of some of this, which was, noted that we needed a little more time to think and talk. But doing so, it's pushing their schedule a week too. So I'd like to touch base then tomorrow to say, where are you now that this has been approved? Can we still launch the 8th, or do you need an extra week, and have that flexibility to be able to work with them on that? But if we would have approved last week, it wouldn't have been much of a question because it gave us that extra week. We were a little behind because of some of this delay.
And they understand, by the way, just to say, we all do, and the administration appreciates the, carefulness that the board has taken with this. So there's no problem with the delay. It only has a material impact, again, on the plan. But, the dialogue is rich,
So just a clarification. So if the motion did allow you flexibility to choose either date, when will you notify parents of when that date's going to be?
So John and I would talk to the high school administration tomorrow, and I have no reason to believe that we wouldn't have an answer tomorrow And then what we would do is we would use our typical communication tools, post on the website, post on Facebook, post on School Messenger, that. So, tomorrow or, Wednesday at the latest, but, this isn't going to take a lot of time to figure out where we are.
And if you do that, I obviously the motion would have to modify itself slightly, but the other thing that I request is, as part of the communication, you make sure it's very clear to parents that even though the cohorts are combined, the days that the kids go to school in a hybrid model don't change through this. I mean, we know that there's change to combine the cohorts, but the days that they get on the bus to go into school and the days that they stay home remain the same. The whole process of a hybrid model doesn't change through all this. It's just the way that you're going to use the time either in class or at home is going to evolve over time. So I think I have to keep reminding myself as we talk through this that that's what it is. But I think it's clear, it'd be very clear to say what this means to my students when you sort of do the announcement, just as a reminder.
John and then Lori.
So I will, Andy, with that, post that slide I showed tonight with the cohort A, cohort B, in person, online, to be very clear about that. I think that slide's clear on where you're supposed to be when for all the cohorts. So I will, with Mark along, post that slide tomorrow. So there, and I'll also, based on Mark's date tomorrow, I'll modify the plan to the correct dates and repost it, just so we don't have misinformation out there. I'll take those down and repost them.
But just to clarify, that slide that you did was largely a high school slide, right?
It was, but it's really the same for all.
I know. So you're going to take it.
And I'll do one for upper and middle too, that just clarifies their days. But that was high school with 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 5, 7, and then 2, 4, 6, 8. But I will modify one that just takes out those and just has A group, B group.
Right, because the other slide you showed for the other grades was a little more involved, like what Nikki Rowe did for the upper L, right? So that was. I think keeping it simple is really the approach. So okay,
I'm with you. Yep.
Lori.
So I'm not sure, because it seemed like we were all ready and set on a date, and then we just went around and around about changing the dates. And I would really like to push for the start of second semester if possible.
So and again, with apologies for what was maybe creating confusion. The original start of second semester was February 1st. But we, as a team, decided that we had to push that out to February 8th, just because of the need to, plan properly. And that's been agreed to and understood and communicated. The reason that we're talking about potentially the 15th is, I just want to say, as John said, that date of the 8th was predicated on potentially the board, making them, approving last week. And it's no problem that the board didn't approve last week. In fact, it's provided healthy dialogue. But because it's been pushed to this week, it theoretically pushes the planning back a week. I say theoretically because I don't know. I would so we're going to try to shoot for the 8th. But again, this is one of those things where I want to, I don't want to have to come back to the board and say, hey, we couldn't make the 8th. And now that, so what I'm asking for is just a chance to talk to administration, see where they are, and then provide clarity to the community as late as Wednesday, but maybe as early as tomorrow. That's all. But I know what the goal is, to try to do the 8th, and so does the high school administration. The question is it 100% possible or not? And I need to know that one last time, because once we say it, we say it. So that's the reason I'm making that request.
Shannon, would you repeat the motion on the table, or you have a comment?
I was going to say, I move that we accept the proposal as presented offering administration flexibility in its implementation as they see appropriate based upon conditions and response. So again,
any other comment?
So can I ask my question? Flexibility meaning like date wise, or flexibility like, so what, I guess I need some clarity, like what's the flexibility going to be? Because is it going to be, it's going to be, what's inflexible as I understand it is there's 2 days of in-person instruction and 2 days of,
I think
I'm usually very good with gray areas, but what I don't want is to vote on this and this vague idea of flexibility, and then something comes up and we're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what we meant. Well, I don't know where the flexibility starts and ends.
I think it would be that we would get updates, because Mark's been wonderful about communicating with families and with the board about when they need to make adjustments to things and why they're doing it. So I've never had to, I don't think there needs to be like a micromanageable accountability to it. But I think that when you're talking about, let's just say that they have 2 days of in-class instruction and they have 2 days of Zoom. And if for some reason they can't do 4 full days of instruction, they have to maybe do some reinforcement and some reteaching of it, because it helps to have that tangible for some instruction and reteach for the other environment. So giving them flexibility so that they can actually say, the way that I've designed my lesson plan needs some, ability to be refined without having a special board meeting. My concern is that if they need to, we always talk about giving them the opportunity to pivot, but I think with some of the proposals that they have such detail in it to give expectations that if for some reason they have to pivot, we have to call an emergency board meeting and vet it over a number of nights. And I just think that that's not always been the most ideal situation for administration to be able to navigate fluidly. So it could be dates, and it could be how, if the instruction needs to be refined to meet student expectations, that when we're saying in our meeting that we're going to do 2 days of, 4 days of instruction, lesson plan A, B, C, and D, days 1, 2, 3, 4, and suddenly it's not refining as they would have hoped because, some of it needs to be more tangible, then we give them that flexibility. That's all. So I just don't want to get to the point where they have to get to the micromanaged level because this has a lot of detail in it that they can't pivot without an emergency board meeting either. So that's
that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying but we're not saying we say 2 days of in-person and 2 days of Zoom. That part's not flexible.
No.
That's what I wanted clarity on.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. No,
I don't mean lesson plans. I mean 2 days of in-person and 2 days of Zoom. That's what we're talking about. That's what I'm saying yes or no to.
That's correct.
I saw Lori and then Matt.
Okay, so I'm in favor of the February 8th go time. And I agree with Jenna. I don't like the word flexible. I'd like to know what we're voting on. I'd like that to be concrete, sequential. And I have no problem, trusting the administration, but I want to know exactly what I'm voting on. And I don't like the gray area either.
So could I just address that? What I believe the board is voting on is the plan. The plan is presented just as it is presented. And that's what I think the board is voting on. The flexibility that I'm referring to has to do primarily with whether the plan would be implemented the 8th or the 15th. I think that what Board Member Barnes, and I'm not wanting to speak, for her, she certainly can herself and did. What I think, and I think it's important to say it because sometimes when you say it, then reflect back and it's like, well, that is what I meant or not. The way I interpret that is merely this: that the fundamentals of the plan are not going to shift, but what might be, for instance, what might phase in, and it's very much the conversation we had tonight. If we say it's 2 days of Zoom and 2 days of live, of in person, And that's what the board is voting on. But we find that for many, that 2 days of Zoom appears to be too much, then the administration would be able to, accommodate that flexibility to not say, well, this is what we're doing, damn the torpedoes, but rather to take in incoming data and be able to adjust to the reality of it, rather than necessarily come back to the board and say, here's the data that we're getting, can we, modify a little bit to slow down the pace or something like that. That's what I'm interpreting Mrs. Barnes to say, which is not changing the fundamentals, but if anything is putting into practice the thing that the board asked, which is be careful in your implementation.
That's exactly what I meant, Mark.
Okay, that's how I'm interpreting what Vice Chair Barnes said, but not that we're gonna like pull a fast one and say, well, that's we want it. We determined flexibility to mean we're not doing cameras anymore. Certainly not. I mean, wouldn't possibly and couldn't possibly. So anyway, and the board may choose not to want to give. They maybe want us to come back and say, here's what the data is telling us, but at a certain point that gets to, like at what level of information does the board want on things, and that.
Well, what I think that board member Barnes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shannon, was saying is that she wants, the administration has presented a plan that it plans to move forward with, but wants administration to have flexibility for optimization and improvements as they arise. Is that correct, Shannon?
That is.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, I just want to talk to John for a second. John, I have your sample high school concurrent learning schedule slide up. Would that be helpful as a visual for those out in the public to take a look at, just so they could see exactly what we're talking about? Or do you think it's the point is moot right now?
Well, I think that would come. I mean, I think that, that's part of the thing that we're gonna, be sharing in the days to come, so that people understand, to Andy's point about, what do the cohort days look like and so on and so forth. I don't know that we, unless the board wants it, I don't know that we need to do that now.
Matt, I'm confused about sharing it again. I already shared that tonight. Are you saying share it again? I'm confused about what you're asking.
Yeah, the one that says, okay, if you've already shared it once, then it shows, because it shows cohort A going to school Monday, Tuesday, with cohort B being online Monday, Tuesday, and all the periods and everything like that.
Yeah.
So if that's, it seems like it was done a long time ago, and there was a question asked, so everybody's going to be going to school. Cohort A is going to be going to school Monday, Tuesday. Those days, the mechanics of it all aren't really going to change. It's the addition of the online programming and the concurrent learning that's going to change.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that everybody is clear on that also.
Yep.
So, okay, thanks, John.
Oh, can I offer up a suggestion? If the motion says at the beginning of the second semester, then it sounds like we will go with the 8th. And unless for some unforeseen reason we have to push back second semester, then at least this will begin at the beginning of second semester.
Whenever that date gets named, either the 8th or the 15th. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's right now, it's the 8th, right? That's what families are expecting.
Right.
Just a thought.
So,
it was the 1st, and then it was the 8th. Now it's maybe the 8th or the 15th.
So here's the deal. I mean, if you want to call it the 8th, we'll call it the 8th. What I'm trying to tell you is that if there is a reason that it can't be the 8th, power school glitch, anything, then I can't make, water from a stone. So I'm gonna have to come back to you and tell you it can't be the 8th. So what I'm telling you is I'd like it to be the 8th. It was the 1st, but there's a reason that it didn't stay the 1st. So we're not trying to be difficult. We're trying to, lay it out the best we can so that we can minimize change. So all I need, or all I'm asking for, is an agreement that the semester will be the 8th or the 15th, knowing full well that your collective wish is the 8th. But
I would say to that, my motion would probably sustain your intentions. So I'd like to keep it as is. And based on your proactive communications, I think you can decide that based upon your meeting with your leadership and what will be the best next steps. So you can set your timeline based on my motion, what will work best and execute the most successfully. Would that be helpful? Just to keep it the way I have it?
it is to me. It is to me.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Lori?
I understand the emotion, the motion on the floor. Again, I will not vote for that motion because I just think it's too gray and there's too much flexibility, just so you know.
Well, then in full disclosure, I think I'm also going to be voting no, not because I don't trust the school district and not for the same reasons as Lori, but I just don't feel like a switch right now to this particular model, asking kids to go in person 2 days and then be on Zoom for 2 full days. I don't feel like it's the best direction for school, for kids. I think that there's families and there's reasoning for not changing right now unless that change is to be in person fully. And I have concerns about the plan as is. And so I think I'm going to be voting no.
Any other discussion?
Can we have the motion reread again the way it is? Because I've lost what it really is.
I move that we accept the plan as presented, offering administration flexibility in its implementation.
Andy?
So I understand where I lose in that motion is because it's missing the transitional start, even if it's as simple as saying, oh God, this has been, I'm running out of patience with all this because we've gone around the circle about 85 different times here. My reading on this is that we're going to switch to a single cohort model. We're going to figure out a way to do what proper level of instruction on those other days as we can. That doesn't mean Zoom all day. I mean, everybody's talking about 2 days in class, 2 days Zoom. Well, that's probably may not be the way that it is. I mean, it's going to be the flexibility that Shannon's talking about is how they use those 2 days, those 4 days together with the cohort model. I think that's what we're giving administration the ability to do the right thing about. What bothers me a little bit is I think we need to be, even if we say starting on the 8th of February and administration finds that they can't do a full implementation until the 15th, they can still do some level of implementation. Kids are still going to be going to school the same way. Maybe for that first week, they don't have the full experience that they ultimately will get. When I talked about crawl, walk, run, that's sort of the way I'm looking at it. So for me, I'd like the motion to be accept the model as it is, as proposed, offering administration flexibility to implement as appropriate and start. And then the second semester officially starts on the 8th of February for this purposes of this. Crisp it up along that way. Lori, just a question. Would that address your concerns?
Yes.
Because the risk is if the 8th doesn't work for the nuts and bolts of Power School, there's a way to work around that to get by that extra week. But at least we could leave this meeting with a stake in the ground. That's sort of that's where my head's at right now. Because if Shannon's motion's the way it is without a date, I'm sort of online with Lori that it just feels like we're not giving the right answer. So
I mean, we're fine with that.
I will amend my motion as stated then, Andy. As you stated.
And I'll second.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 1. The motion carries 410. All right, moving on to the next item. And that is review of draft letter to governor requesting prioritization of vaccines for New Hampshire educators and staff. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Before I share my screen, I just wanted to say a couple things, which is this came up before at the recommendation of Board Member Rothaus. We all agreed it was a good idea to move forward and draft a letter to the governor that I drafted for your review, which is to request that vaccinations, that educators and staff working with children are able to move up into the 1B phase of the vaccination plan. So I'm going to go ahead and read this letter to you. What I'm asking for, if you have any immediate feedback, just to let me know. So, dear Governor Sununu, thank you for your ongoing efforts and leadership during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm writing on behalf of the Merrimack School Board, SAU 26, to respectfully request that, effective immediately, you move educators, staff, daycare workers, and any others that work with children into vaccination phase 1B of the New Hampshire COVID-19 vaccination plan. It's my understanding that you strongly support the reopening of schools in the state, as many do, and I also understand that New Hampshire is one of the few states in the country that hasn't followed CDC guidelines to prioritize teachers by vaccination phase 1B. If this is true, it's disappointing. Regardless, you have the opportunity and authority to help those that work with New Hampshire's youngest and most precious vulnerable citizens to ensure that they also feel safe in their work environment, particularly given the close proximity of people in these spaces. I implore you to do the right thing to help us provide safer spaces for employees in the schools and daycare centers in New Hampshire. Thank you for your time and consideration. Respectfully yours. Any feedback, changes? Andy?
So I think this is okay the way it is. I don't want to hold out much hope given what the governor has stated so far, the way that he's rolling out, because this question has been posed to him directly more than one time. But perhaps if enough districts do this, he reflects it. He might reflect a change. But I mean, I will do it as a sign of symbolic support of staff, but I'm not sitting here with any blind faith that this is going to really affect anything.
Is everyone else okay with this letter? Yeah, do we need to take a motion, or is this show of? I guess it doesn't hurt to take a motion.
If you want for formality, I move that we accept the letter to, actually, if I may send it, offer one edit.
Yeah, sure, of course.
The Honorable Chris Sununu, John's his brother.
Oh, sorry.
A couple Johns in the family, but not the one up there right now. So I don't know his middle initials, I'll be honest with you.
John used to be a governor, but not the right one.
He went old school.
Long time ago.
It's ingrained in my brain, so I guess it's good to have someone proofread.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I will say that my motion is to endorse the letter as presented from the board.
So do I have a second? I mean, by Jenna, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The motion carries 500. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. That is proposed memorandum of agreement between the Merrimack School Board and the Merrimack Teachers Association regarding the use of sick time. Mark McLaughlin and
So,
Melissa. So Mark.
yeah, that name, Melissa, should have been removed, so my apologies. So as has been the case periodically throughout this pandemic, there have been situations that have arisen that have, sort of been new and novel, and so this is one. That there was a memorandum of understanding between the school district and the MTA back at the beginning of the school year, and there is this one now. So I'll just briefly describe the scenario that makes us want to ask you to agree to this, and then if you'd like me to read it, I'm happy to do it. So we have tried very hard to accommodate teachers' requests for remote assignment, if that's been their request. And we have started, let's say with, if there's a bona fide request under FMLA, a bona fide request under ADA, or a bona fide request up until December 31st for FFCRA, that's for childcare. And so those are ones that we don't have a choice as an employer, we have to follow. And then there have been other people who have made requests, and we've really worked hard to accommodate those requests, even when we haven't technically had to. Like, for instance, my health is fine, but my spouse's health isn't fine, and if I could work remote, that would be great. Well, we've had enough students choosing remote that we've been able to make that kind of work, or any number of scenarios like that. But right now we are, in a different place as employers, needing to. So FFCRA is gone, and so we have to accommodate under FMLA and ADA, and we're finding it's a little bit more difficult to accommodate requests that don't fall under those buckets. And so we're making that point. Now, so the question then becomes, if we cannot accommodate a request to be remote, and a person has, let's say, a documented medical condition, and so they, have to take a leave, the question then becomes, would the district allow them to use some of their sick time to offset some of that leave time, so it's not all unpaid leave? So rather than make that decision on an ad hoc basis, like, depending on, just sort of yes to you and no, or whatever, we just can't operate that way. So what we did was we asked our attorney to draft up a draft MOA that would be for the specific purposes of this school year. The MOA specifically says that it would end at the end of this school year, or at such time as the World Health Organization declares a pandemic over, or the governor rescinds his emergency orders, or what have you. So this is not a permanent change. This is an agreement between the district and the MTA for a very specific reason, and it would be capped to 20 days of accrued sick time. So in a nutshell, that's the request. This is developed by legal counsel, so it meets that standard. And we are asking for the board to allow this memorandum of agreement between the district and the board to be operational through, as I said, that stated time. And then it would go away and it would return to the way it would normally be. So I'm happy if, Cindy, if you think it would be helpful for me to read it, or if the summary was sufficient, whatever you choose.
I think that the greatest level of transparency is if you read it. So I would request that you read it.
So memorandum of agreement between Merrimack School District and the Merrimack Teachers Association. This, pardon me, this memorandum of agreement is entered into by the Merrimack School District and the Merrimack Teachers Association, NEA New Hampshire, Parents Association. Hereinafter, the term employee will refer to any employee represented by the association and covered by the collective bargaining agreement in effect for the period July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2022. Whereas the district and the association wish to preserve the health of students, employees, and community members during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas some employees have requested remote assignments due to documented medical conditions, which pose a significant risk to the employee, given the potential for exposure to COVID-19. Whereas the district has granted employee requests for remote assignments where possible, but given the needs of students, the district has not been able to grant all such requests. And whereas the parties wish to allow employees with documented medical conditions whose requests for remote assignments could not be granted the opportunity for paid sick leave. Now, therefore, the parties agree to the following provisions and modifications to the collective bargaining agreement, CBA. 1. Employees who are unable to work due to a documented medical condition, which poses a significant risk to the employee's health if exposed to COVID-19, will be granted a leave of absence and will be permitted to use up to 20 days of accrued sick leave during said leave, and a remaining leave will be unpaid. The parties agreed that the provision in the Article 11.2 of the CBA prohibiting the use of sick leave for non-illness reasons is temporarily waived for the duration of this MOA. 3, the parties agreed that this MOA shall set no precedent or past practice and shall not be used in any proceedings except to enforce its terms. 4, the parties agree that this MOA does not replace the current collective bargaining agreement, which is still in full force and effect, except as explicitly modified by this MOA or other negotiated agreements between the association and the district. 5, the parties recognize that this MOA may include topics which are not mandatory subjects of bargaining, and to the extent it does, the parties reserve the right to assert or refuse to negotiate such subjects in any future negotiations, and any obligations created herein shall expire with this MOA. The parties also acknowledge that the purpose of this MOA is to address health and safety issues created by a global pandemic in order that schools may reopen for the 2020-2021 school year. The parties acknowledge that conditions may change, and it will be necessary for the parties to be flexible and to cooperate with one another to adapt to any changes. The association agrees it will not file any grievance or ULP related to a provision in this MOA without first consulting with the superintendent and attempting in good faith to reach a mutual resolution. The board reserves the right to assert that provisions which relate to non-mandatory subjects of bargaining are not subject to the grievance process or the provisions of RSA 273-A:5. 6, the parties agree that this memorandum of agreement is temporary and will only be in effect for the 2020-2021 school year or until the World Health Organization's Director General declares the COVID-19 pandemic to be finished, or the Governor of New Hampshire's state of emergency declaration expires, whichever comes sooner. And then the request that it would be signed by the chair of the school district and the president of the Merrimack Teachers Association.
Thank you. Any questions? Discussion? And then Dr. McLaughlin, can you be clear what you're asking for us again?
So what I would be asking is that the board would be in agreement to this and, waive the 2-week rule so that this could be in effect as soon as it would be signed, assuming that that would be the board's will. That's our request.
I'm not in favor of waiving the 2-week rule because I really would like to research this more if possible.
Any other discussion? Shannon?
Would it be, I guess I'm asking Lori directly. We do have a scheduled meeting. This is a special meeting, so I have a scheduled meeting next Monday. Would that give you enough time that we could put it on the agenda and waive the 2-week rule at that meeting?
Sure, that would work.
Okay. Anyone opposed to that? Okay. All right, moving on. The next item is public comments on agenda items.
Should have stayed off mute, so sorry about that. So I have 2 public comments on agenda items. First is from Sarah Leland from 149 Natticook Road. Good evening. I'm a parent of high schoolers and an employee of the district. Please vote no on the revised 512 model. Kids do not need another upheaval. They do not need a new schedule or new teachers. The cameras are not meant for schools and should not be forced to try to meet educational needs. The Wi-Fi can't support it. It is not good for students or teachers. Best, Sarah Leland. And next is from Megan Shepard, class of 2022, and I will not need to read her her address into the record as she is a student and a minor. Good evening. I'm a junior at Merrimack High School. I'm writing you all today to encourage you to not support the newly proposed learning plan. As a student, I have attended one of my classes like this, both remotely one week and in class the other. Being part of the half remote was very difficult. I found it very difficult to keep up with the in-class students simply from just not being there. This may seem like a good idea, but I believe both students and teachers will struggle with the adjustment. In addition, I would like to recognize your efforts with suicide prevention last meeting, which I appreciate very much. However, I think Merrimack High School needs to address an issue that I feel has existed all throughout high school. Counselors not doing enough. I've not once been reached out to by my guidance counselor, which I believe is a big part of their job. If Merrimack truly wants to focus on suicide prevention, they need to not just introduce new solutions, but also solve the problems that already exist. I do appreciate all that the school board has been doing during these difficult times, and I thank you all. Sincerely, Megan Shepard.
Thank you, Shannon. Okay. At this point, I will attend a motion to go into non-public session per RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, A, B, and C.
So moved.
Moved by Shannon, second by Jenna. Thanks everyone so much and have a good night.
I vote in favor.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we're gonna get you through it there.
I know.
So I vote in favor. If you could ask the others, that'd be great.
Shannon, okay, Shannon in favor. Lori? Jenna?
In favor.
Andy?
I think your computer's speaking for me. Yes, I'm in favor.
Oh my gosh, my computer has been zoomed out all day. It's zooming. And I vote in favor. So that motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you and good night.
Merrimack TV is committed to our community. From gavel-to-gavel coverage of town and school board meetings to updates on town services and projects, we aim to keep you connected.
Good morning. I'm Kyle Fox, Public Works Director for the town of Merrimack.
Hi, I'm Diane Trippett. I'm the town clerk tax collector for the town of Merrimack.
I'm Captain Matt Tarleton with the Merrimack, New Hampshire Police Department.
And keep the public informed of every motion.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
And many moments, so you can be confident that we're here for you. Thanks for watching. Stay connected. Follow Merrimack TV on Facebook.